What if I told you that a narrow strip of water, barely 33 kilometers wide, controls the flow of nearly a third of the world's oil? And right now, that route, the Strait of Hormuz, is under serious geopolitical tension. If anything goes wrong here, the impact could hit fuel prices, food costs, and economies across the globe, including yours. Welcome. Today, we are diving into one of the most important and most vulnerable points in the global economy, the Strait of Hormuz. We will break down what it is, why it matters, what the current risks are, and how it could affect everyday life around the world. Let's start simple. A strait is a naturally formed narrow waterway that connects two larger bodies of water. These passages are incredibly important because they act as shortcuts for global trade. For example, the Strait of Gibraltar connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea, making it a key route for ships traveling between Europe, Africa, and beyond. Now imagine if one of these routes become unstable. Global trade doesn't stop, but it becomes slower, more expensive, and far more uncertain. Now, let's zoom in on the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, which then opens into the Arabian Sea and the wider Indian Ocean. Geographically, it sits between Iran to the north and Oman to the south. The strait is about 167 kilometers long, but its most critical feature is its narrowness. At its tightest point, it's only about 33 kilometers wide. But what's even more surprising is this: the actual shipping lanes used by massive oil tankers are just 3 kilometers wide in each direction, separated by a small buffer zone. That makes it one of the world's most important and most vulnerable maritime choke points. So, who controls this crucial route? This is where international law comes in. Under the United Nations Convention, the Strait of Hormuz is classified as an international strait used for navigation. This gives all countries the right of what's called transit passage. In simple terms, ships can move through the strait continuously and without obstruction. This applies to commercial cargo ships, oil and gas tankers, and even military vessels. Now, although the strait lies within the territorial waters of Iran and Oman, these countries cannot block international transit. They can regulate safety and environmental rules, but they cannot shut it down. However, the situation isn't that straightforward. Iran signed the convention but has not fully ratified it, and it often emphasizes a slightly different concept called innocent passage, which comes with more conditions. Over the years, during periods of tension, especially involving the US and Israel, Iran has occasionally threatened to disrupt traffic through the strait. Now, to be clear, a complete closure is extremely rare and difficult to sustain, but even the threat of disruption can shake global markets because when it comes to energy supply, uncertainty alone is enough to drive prices up. Let's talk numbers because this is where the scale becomes clear. Every single day, around 20 to 21 million barrels of oil pass through the strait. That's roughly 30% of all seaborne oil trade in the world. On top of that, about 20% of global LNG also flows through this route. Major exporters using this passage include Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And now here's the key detail. Around 70 to 80% of this energy is headed towards Asia, powering economies like India, China, Japan, and South Korea. So, what happens if this flow is disrupted? Even a small slowdown can lead to rising crude oil prices, increased fuel costs, higher transportation expenses. For countries like India, which rely heavily on energy imports, this can quickly translate into more expensive petrol and diesel, higher electricity bills, and increased inflation across everyday goods. In short, what happens in this narrow strait doesn't stay there, but the impact goes beyond just oil and gas. The Gulf region is also a major exporter of fertilizers like urea and ammonia, metals such as aluminum and steel. At the same time, these countries import a significant portion of their food, including wheat, rice, corn, and dairy products. In times of disruption, some nations even resort to airlifting essential goods, which is much faster but far more expensive. And that added cost eventually shows up as higher prices in the market. What this situation really highlights is the fragile nature of global supply chains. A single choke point like the Strait of Hormuz can influence economies, energy security, and inflation across the world. And in an interconnected global system, even regional tensions can have far reaching consequences. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that explains global events in a simple way. Thanks for watching.